Hey everyone, it's Coach Paul here from my Performance Center, and welcome to this slideshow video. Today we're going to be breaking down plyometric exercises. Not only are we going to be differentiating plyometrics from other explosive exercises, but also we're going to further break down plyometric exercises into subcategories. It's important to know these subcategories because all plyos are not created equal, and they'll elicit different types of adaptations. So we'll kick things off here by defining what an exercise like a jump or a throw actually requires in order to be considered a plyometric exercise. So plyos require a rapid eccentric or stretch phase, followed by a brief amortization phase, and then an explosive concentric phase, all happening without interruption or pauses in between. Now, although all plyometrics are explosive in nature, not all explosive exercises can be considered plyometric. For example, a non-counter movement jump, where you are jumping from a dead stop in a full squat position, may be fast and explosive. However, it does not have a rapid stretch or a transition phase, so it can't be considered plyometric because it will not elicit the same adaptation as a plyometric. That's why it's important to further break down plyometrics into whether they train the fast stretch shortening cycle or slow stretch shortening cycle, because different types of plyometrics now will elicit different adaptations within those two processes. So now that we know why it's important to categorize our exercises, we'll dive a little bit deeper into what makes each category unique and the adaptations they elicit. So starting with our explosive exercises, they're primarily muscular driven and reflective of explosive strength, and they require a start from a dead stop. So in our horizontal seated broad jump example, we want to make sure that our athletes aren't introducing their own kind of counter movement or bounce before they're jumping. So we'll tell them to start from a seated position on a box or on a bench, just to make sure they don't cheat the exercise trying to get a better distance, and the exercise is completely muscular driven. Going over to our fast stretch shortening cycles on the yellow box there, or our fast plyos, these ones are really the opposite of the explosive, strictly explosive exercises because they are primarily tendon driven. So they're reflective of our stiffness in our tendons, and the special part about them is that they specifically require our ground contact time to be 0.25 seconds or less. So the time it takes us to absorb the load and transition into our concentric phase has to be less than 0.25 seconds. The reason being is that keeps our muscles out of the equation and ensures that we're training our tendons. So if we look at our vertical jump example, pogo hops are going to be a very common exercise in order to target the fast stretch shortening cycle because it ensures that we're able to get off the ground as quickly as possible. We can theoretically also do depth jumps to train the fast stretch shortening cycle. However, the height from which you're dropping down onto the ground from is going to impact your ground contact time. So for example, if you step off of a 12-inch box, maybe you can jump up and pop up off the ground in less than 0.25 seconds. That's great. That means that you are still training your fast stretch shortening cycle. However, if you increase that 12-inch box to 24-inch box and you can't get off the ground in 0.25 seconds or less, you are no longer training your fast stretch shortening cycle. You're now doing a slow plyo. As for slow plyos, those are both muscle and tendon driven. They are reflective of your relative strength relative to body weight, and they require only an uninterrupted transition from eccentric to concentric. So these are the ones like a counter movement jump, for example, is a lot slower in nature than a pogo hop. Pogo hops are more frequent and they're done at higher speeds than a counter movement jump where you load into your position and explode up. So these are the plyos that are over 0.25 seconds in ground contact time. Again, you can still do a depth jump and perform a slow plyometric. However, that would have to be from a height high enough to be to require ground contact time greater than 0.25 seconds, because that then makes sure that our muscles are also involved in the exercise if it's a slow plyometric. So the big difference here between slow and fast plyos is that fast plyos need to be fast enough or have short enough ground contact time so that we're only providing stimulus and only using our tendons, whereas our slow stretch shortening cycles, all they require is an uninterrupted transition phase from eccentric to amortization to concentric, and we have to just make sure that they require a longer ground contact time to make sure that our muscles are actually being involved. All right, so now we can move on to illustrate some examples of exercises within each category. Starting in the blue box on the left, we have our explosive exercise example, where athlete is performing a seated box jump. Again, starting from that seated position just ensures that our athlete is starting from a dead stop and not using a counter movement or bounce before jumping. What this allows us to ensure is that our exercise is primarily muscular driven. Now we'll move on to our slow stretch shortening cycle example. We have our athlete performing a triple vertical jump. Here we have a smooth transition from the eccentric to amortization to concentric phase without any pauses interrupting each phase of each jump. Finally, we'll move on to our fast stretch shortening cycle plyo, where we have our depth jump. So our athlete is stepping off of a 12-inch box, again, still smoothly transitioning from absorbing that load eccentrically and expressing force concentrically. However, the big difference here is that our athlete is getting off the ground much quicker. Keeping that ground contact time below 0.25 seconds is imperative here to make sure that we're targeting adaptations of the fast stretch shortening cycle. Now to wrap things up here, I just want to reiterate that it's important that we train all aspects of these jumps and throws, because although some may work independently of one another, they all contribute to our performance goals, whether it's running faster or jumping higher. We can still benefit from training with explosive exercises, slow and fast stretch shortening cycle plyos. It's actually more important that we do all three instead of focusing just on one, and knowing the difference between the three of them allows us to make sure that we're not really missing any gaps here in our training. So that about does it for this presentation. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email us at info@ironperformance.ca or drop them in the comment section below. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of our future videos.